Over the course of this short video, I will explain the classroom assessment technique, focused autobiographical sketches. I will offer some suggestions about the best context for this assessment, as well as its limitations and advantages, some tips for best practices, and how to provide feedback to learners using this method. According to Fenwick and Parsons, the power of assessment for learning is that it occurs during the teaching and learning process, rather than after teaching and learning has been completed. It is primarily focused on how learners might improve the quality of their work during their study. Or, as Brookfield says in his book, The Skillful Teacher, a helpful evaluation provides clear direction for the future, and it instills in the learner a desire to engage in further inquiry. Focused autobiographical sketches are an informal assessment strategy that utilizes the principle of assessment for learning. The focused autobiographical sketch is a 1 to 2 page piece of writing that describes a single successful learning experience that the learner has had in the past. It is best to ask learners to write about something that is relevant to the course material you are engaging with. For example, Sue Ann Compton, in her Introduction to College Writing class, asked the students to write about one successful writing experience they had in an English class when they were writing an essay. The sketch is a way of having the learners share an experience which helps develop a connection between the instructor and the learner, thus reducing anxiety at the beginning of the course. It also helps instructors determine where the students are in terms of their foundation knowledge, and if need be, allows the instructor to begin by filling in gaps in this foundational knowledge, which will ensure everyone begins on the same page. It can also be useful in gauging learning over the semester or course term. For example, learners can look back on this initial piece of writing and see their progress, which helps build self-confidence and self-awareness. The act of writing the sketch allows writers to reflect on their past learning experiences and see what has worked well for them in the past and what could be improved upon, thus building self-awareness and self-assessment skills. Thomas A. Angelo and K. Patricia Cross, in their book Classroom Assessment Techniques, a handbook for college teachers, list the following teaching goals associated with the focused autobiographical sketch. Develop a lifelong love of learning, develop leadership skills, develop a commitment to personal achievement, develop a commitment to one's own values, develop respect for each other, cultivate emotional health and well-being, develop capacity to make wise decisions. In what context would this strategy work best? As I mentioned previously, Sue Ann Compton uses this strategy quite successfully in an introductory college writing course. In addition to having learners reflect on their own learning, this assessment technique could also act as a pre-assessment to the overall writing skills of the class, providing useful information about the types of writing concerns the instructor should focus on. Focused autobiographical sketches are most effective in introductory courses, particularly those that cause high anxiety, especially with nervous first years or those returning to school after long absence. This technique works well across disciplines, but is best done at the beginning of a course or unit, and as this assessment technique requires some time for learners to write and instructors to evaluate, it is likely you'll only want to use it once per course and often with smaller classes. Fenwick and Parsons note the advantages to focused autobiographical sketch are that it allows you to assess only those dimensions of students' experience that are likely to be relevant to the course content and goals, which is much more effective than simply reading general personal statements. This technique also allows you to gather information on the range and diversity of past experience, as well as a level of self-awareness within a class. This information can provide an important starting point for setting instructional goals or for future direction of the class specific to the particular mix of students. Another advantage I see is that by keeping a copy of the sketches and returning the copied sketches to the students at the end of the course, you can show them firsthand their improvement over the course period and raise their self-confidence and self-awareness. According to Fenwick and Parsons, some of the limitations of this assessment strategy are that judging the quality, value, and intensity of individual learning experiences is very subjective, and as there is no simple, widely accepted guidelines for this, instructors will need to develop their own. That said, once you have established this criteria, you can reuse it each time you use this assessment. Reading through the sketches and responding to them requires a lot of time and attention. On a final note, while the writing component of this assessment shouldn't prove too challenging for students, the self-reflection and critical assessment piece may require instruction and guidance to ensure that the sketches will yield useful information. Some of the best practices as laid out by Angelo and Cross are as follows. Focused autobiographical sketches should only be used for diagnostic and formative assessment. Before beginning, spend time reflecting on what aspect of the student's learning experience you want to focus on. Clearly limit the focus and ensure it's directly related to the course goals and objectives. Limit the sketch by determining the focus, such as professional, academic, or interpersonal, as well as limiting the time frame or period of the student's life you wish to focus on. As with all things, consider your assessment or your evaluation criteria before beginning. Think about the most useful way to analyze the student's responses. Having reflected upon all of the above, construct a very explicit question along with a very explicit directions for the sketch. The focused autobiographical sketch not only provides the learner with feedback, but the exercise also has the ability to supply feedback to the instructor. The feedback given to the learner will likely be written in nature, and perhaps less important than what the instructor has to say is the feedback that the student provides for themselves about their learning processes in this reflective piece. Generally, with this technique, feedback can take one of three options. Angelo and Cross note that this technique has the potential to gather well-focused information on certain relevant learning experiences, and therefore the analysis should focus on categorizing and counting those experiences that will enable you to better focus the class. One strategy for evaluating the results is to simply categorize the types of experiences as relevant or not relevant to the course content. Then break down the relevant category into types, directly, indirectly, and tangentially relevant to the course content. The second option would be to assess the quality and/or intensity of the experiences the learners have described. The third option is to assess the level of self-awareness or critical reflection demonstrated in the sketch. Compton assembled students with different experiences into groups of 5 and asked students to extract any common general principles. She then took these principles and used them throughout the semester, eventually using these principles as instructional goals. For more information, please check out these resources.